So many people hold Star Wars in high esteem. How can a movie made for kids in the late 70s still be this loved? The first one was groundbreaking and changed the game forever. It sparked a cultural phenomenon that has endured to this day. Most people who grew up watching Star Wars associate happy memories of gathering together with a family and friends to watch the movies. It becomes more than just a movie, but an intrinsic part of a person's development during their formative years. It's something that could be used to connect to other people, establishing bonds of friendship. How many friendships have started by noticing someone with a Star Wars t-shirt and then asking them, "Hey, you like Star Wars?" Or by play-acting lightsaber fights in the schoolyard. That's why nostalgia is such a strong factor in people's attachment to the films. By extension, that connection also elicits a strong negative response by longtime fans when they feel that something so beloved to them isn't being handled with care. But nostalgia is a fickle thing. The early emotional bonds we formed with the films can lead us to misremember them with bright rose-colored hues, softening and hiding away the frayed and unflattering areas we wouldn't overlook or easily forgive as adults. Ultimately, Star Wars was a film aimed at children. But just because something is meant for kids, doesn't mean that it shouldn't be well made. There are aspects such as story, pacing, writing, dialogue, directing, cinematography, and so many more that are taken into consideration when trying to effectively tell a story on film. As with any piece of art, how we react and connect to said films will vary from person to person. Even a very badly filmed movie can be enjoyable, whereas a cinematic masterpiece can be boring. Episode 1's battle between Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and Darth Maul was one of the highlights of the prequels. The Duel of the Fates score was one of the best pieces of Star Wars music John Williams wrote for the saga. In contrast, the movie suffered from cringe-worthy dialogue,
"Are you an angel?" What?
borderline racist characters, logical inconsistencies, and childish physical humor. Episode 2 was the first film to be shot digitally, which started an over-reliance on CG over practical effects, giving us actors working and trying to make sense of even more cringe-worthy dialogue spoken to invisible characters.
It's really hard work. It's difficult to make that believable. I don't know if I have.
Natalie Portman and Hayden Christensen had no believable chemistry in a story where you're supposed to care for their characters' love. There's also the infamous conveyor belt scene that was hashed out the day it was meant to be shot. On the plus side, we get to see new worlds, the Jedi fighting, the birth of the Clone Wars, and less Jar Jar. Episode 3 had a tighter story, well-choreographed fight scenes, although at times too well choreographed to the point that they flirted with the limit of believability. A stunning opening space battle, and an impressive score, specifically Battle of the Heroes. The dialogue and the acting weren't as bad as in the previous films, but it still wasn't great.
I have the high ground!
The ending was like George Lucas was going through a checklist of items that needed to be present in the movie to link it to the old trilogy. Vader's "no" scream broke people's hearts, but not for the right reasons. The original trilogy wasn't perfect either. Since it wasn't all planned out in advance, there were plot holes,
Somehow, I've always known.
questionable choices, leaps in logic, and even some shaky dialogue.
Nerf herder!
On top of that, anyone who sees the film starting with the prequels will be let down by certain dated effects and slower pacing. The Force Awakens was a necessary evil. It had to be similar enough to the old trilogy to regain the fans that were lost due to the prequels, but also, it had to open up the Star Wars universe to show the potential of new stories. There was almost no mention of anything having to do with the prequels other than the words Sith and clones. It was big on nostalgia, directed mostly at people who were fond of the old trilogy, and also it followed the plot of A New Hope very closely, which is one of the reasons it has been criticized. It didn't repeat the story, but it certainly rhymed with it. The Last Jedi was very different than any other Star Wars movie. It took risks and dared to challenge our expectations of what is supposed to happen in a Star Wars movie. Unfortunately, it alienated many people that were hoping to get something more familiar as a film. On the one hand, it is important to look forward, to try to evolve. But on the other hand, the way it was done was not the best. Rian Johnson was very involved in the creative process, as a director should, but he placed too much importance and effort on elements in the movie that added no value or depth. If you've seen the bonus features, you'll understand how important it was for him to have those cow creatures on the beach, the one Luke drinks green milk from. The practical effects are great, but all that effort and logistical nightmare was kind of useless.
I mean, if one said, let's not do the sea cow, let's stop at this point, create a CG version.
I do have to say, from my visit to the location in Ireland,
I think without a helicopter, we are dreaming somewhat. I do think it is very pivotal.
You have to deal with a situation like this. It's tricky.
Because it's a bird sanctuary, It's a UNESCO heritage site. It is so inaccessible. We could only get there for 2 days to shoot.
That scene brought nothing to the story, other than have people gag in the theater. The whole Canto Bight part was also very important to him, and yet, if there's 20 odd minutes you could cut from the film, those would be it.
A casino in Star Wars, you know, with fancy dressed people, it just seemed, and I expressed my fears to Ryan and asked for more input, and he didn't really make it easier. He said he wanted them to look very elegant.
Yeah, it does feel Star Wars.
I hope it feels Star Wars.
It does, and if it does,
I've never done anything like this in Star Wars.
A director does everything in their power to bring their vision to life. The films they create must be a reflection of themselves and not a creation that adheres to what the studio wants or what the fans expect. George Lucas was widely criticized for the choices he made in the prequels, but in the end, it was his creation. They were his mistakes to make. Rian Johnson was successful in crafting an honest and personal film with sound internal logic and clever bits of foreshadowing that paid off throughout. Unfortunately for him, this wasn't a standalone movie or his own trilogy. He had to create a film that had to fit within certain parameters established by the team that laid out the plans for the new trilogy. He made decisions that cut some of the momentum J.J. Abrams had started and sent story elements in different directions. Some of the film's internal logic even conflicts with elements already established in previous films of the saga. In hindsight, I feel he was unknowingly selfish.
And I told Brian this, it's no surprise. I said, I just fundamentally disagree with your concept of this character and how you use him. Having said that, I'll do everything within my power to realize your vision. Because, you know, it's not my character to decide. It belongs to other people. They just rent it out to me.
Now looking onto episode 9, it's hard to envision how the saga can end in a satisfactory way because it almost feels like The Last Jedi was a reset, a new episode 7, meaning that they would need 2 more films to tie everything together nicely without making episode 9 overly long. It's a tall order because the last film has to finish a trilogy, but also conclude 3 consecutive trilogies. It might sound like I'm giving the new movies a hard time, but that's not my intention. Sure, there's the very Disney comedic moments, which you may like or dislike depending on your preferences. There's the quips.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first.
The hentai alien. Some of Han Solo's origins.
Solo.
The very angsty First Order. The need to insert references everywhere. But there is great value to be found in the new films as well. Overall, the acting, writing, and directing is superior to that of the prequels. There are shots and cinematography that you would have never seen in a George Lucas directed movie. The special effects are great, and the marriage of CG and practical elevate the look and feel of the films. Even though the lightsaber battles aren't as refined and overly choreographed as the ones in the prequels, they're filled with emotion and raw strength that denote the Force user's inexperience. It looks like actual people fighting. We get to see other corners of the galaxy in a context different from the main sagas. Rogue One expands on how oppressive the Empire was and adds a sense of urgency to A New Hope. Vader's rampage, the Praetorian Guard battle, and Lightspeed Ram show us that there are still satisfactory ways that the movies can surprise and impress us. The ambitious movie that many people didn't believe in back in 1977 has grown in such a way that it could be compared to a religion. It has its own sacred stories, its followers, its detractors, and the faithful who apply its wisdom to their daily lives. There is a group of followers whose identity has been formed by years of studying the original stories, in this case episodes 4, 5, 6, and so, the original trilogy is seen as the unalterable canon. Any other movie that came after it isn't accepted. Even the special editions are deemed to be apocryphal. Due to their emotional attachment to the series, these followers are unable to analyze the films without bias and feel personally attacked when someone else points out flaws in the classic movies or enjoyment in the newer films. Unfortunately, like with religion, this has led to extremists on both sides, which ruins everything for casual viewers that might be interested in giving it a shot but are turned off by the toxic environment. Obi-Wan Kenobi said something very wise that can be applied to this problem. Many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view. Not everyone had the same experience with the Star Wars universe. Therefore, everyone will have a different opinion on what makes a Star Wars movie great or not. In over 40 years of history, Star Wars has been a part of different people's lives to varying degrees. There are just too many variables to expect everyone to have had the same experience. There are those who saw the original trilogy as adults, loved it and had their kids grow up watching it. Then they saw the prequels as older adults and now might be grandparents watching the new films with their grandkids. There is a generation of kids who grew up watching the original trilogy or were introduced to it by their parents, older siblings, and friends, and in their teens they watched the prequels. Others grew up with the prequels and didn't watch the original trilogy until later. Those who grew up reading and watching Harry Potter or even the Marvel movies might have been less interested in the Star Wars universe because they were already attached to another franchise that they associate with their childhood and with growing up. Some people never got into it at all and are just now getting interested because of all the new movies coming out every year. Now there are kids who will have at least 10 live-action Star Wars films to choose from. All this to say that there isn't one correct way to approach Star Wars or to enjoy it. The experience of the little girl who learned that princesses don't have to be helpless has the same validity as the teen who started learning music because of John Williams' score, or the family that cosplays for Comic-Con, or the guy who goes to the movies to enjoy the space battles. If you grew up with Star Wars, you had your own experience with the film series, and you have the right to like or dislike anything about it. If you love the prequels, be proud of it. If the original trilogy is your bread and butter, that's great. If the new movies are your favorite, don't be ashamed of it. If you watched the movies but never really got into it, that's fine too. What you can't do is expect other people to have the same exact opinion as you and antagonize them if they don't. Picture this. There's someone out there who has great memories of watching episode 2, the same way you might reminisce watching episode 5, and the same way someone else might love watching episode 8 further along in the future. Another person's enjoyment shouldn't diminish your own. No matter what Disney does from here on out, just remember that there is no way that every movie will please every type of fan. As long as there are people willing to revisit the galaxy far, far away, we will continue to have more Star Wars stories headed our way. Some will be childish, while some will have depth. We'll get to revisit beloved characters, and we will become acquainted with new ones. We'll have more chances to create fond memories, either for ourselves or for our children, and one day they might have the same attachment to Star Wars that we have. Even when we age, the kid inside of us will continue to be excited whenever the Lucasfilm logo appears on screen before the music starts, if we allow ourselves to let go and enjoy the ride.